Hi there, I'm Davey Cretin for Cretin Classics. Welcome to the channel, and this is the first time I'm having an in-person guest. Please welcome my better half who does all the thumbnails, the production work, the lighting, the camera work on all my videos. My better half, Miss Tia.
Hey, everybody.
So Tia is my first in-person guest. I will be having more in-person guests coming up, hopefully around the holidays. But that's another story for another time. Today, we are here to rank the 5 studio albums of the power trio, rock trio, whatever you want to call them, punk trio, new wave, reggae trio, known as the Police. The Police formed in England in the mid-70s. It's Sting, aka Gordon Sumner, on bass guitar and lead vocals for almost every song, but not quite every song. On drums, percussion, and chaos, the great Stuart Copeland. I love that guy. I think he's an amazing drummer. On guitars, Andy Summers. So the Police formed as a trio. There was another guy, Henry Padavonia or something to that effect, Padaval. He left the band and he was on guitar, and Andy came in, and it's been the same lineup ever since. The band made 5 studio records. We're going to rank the 5 albums. But before we do that, just some brief history. After the 5 albums, the band sort of went on hiatus. Sting did a solo album, and of course, Mr. Stuart Copeland did some soundtracks, a bunch of soundtracks for TV and movies. And Andy made solo records, and he did a lot of collaborative records, including a few with Robert Fripp from King Crimson. So they all had their own careers, and I think Stuart was the one who got into photography, right?
That sounds right.
Yeah, I
Sure.
think he was the guy who was into photography, so he had a separate career with that. I think they've all done autobiographies, and Sting, as everyone knows, has had a very prolific solo career. So that's the Police in a nutshell, and I'm going to let Tia, my lovely guest, begin discussing her number 5 album by the Police. Take it away, Tia.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I mean, all of the albums are really great, so it's almost very difficult to rank them. But I'm going to have here at my number five, their third studio album. Still a great album, but I consider it a bit of a lull. Zenyatta Mandada. The things that I think are great. Well, I mean, obviously it has the two great hits, as a do da da, and Don't Stand So Close to Me, which are great, but probably not even really their strongest hits. I think. Um, some of the parts that where why this doesn't really work for me so well, as he knows, Canary in a Coal Mine is like my least favorite Police song of all time. That just by itself just really tanks this album for me. It just has I don't even know how to describe it. Like this very nursery rhyme, like it's almost like a hoedown or something. I know it's meant to be reggae, but it almost sounds like a hoedown or something like that. Very similar to Bombs Away and even Man in a Suitcase. It just has this really almost cartoonish kind of quality that I just don't care for myself. What I do really love about this album is it has a lot of Andy Summers like very beautiful jangly guitars and songs like Driven to Tears, Voices Inside My Head, Behind My Camel, and Shadows in the Rain. Like it's just very really spooky, and it's just like there's like a very beautiful eerie motif that goes through all of those songs.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my number five.
Okay, my number 5, long paper. Good job, David. My number 5 is from 1981, Ghost in the Machine. And this album was released in October of 1981. It hit number 1 in the UK, number 2 in the US. It went platinum in the UK and triple platinum in the US. So over 3 million copies sold here. It's 11 songs. It's 41 minutes. It was produced by the Police and Hugh Padgham, who's known for working with Peter Gabriel and Genesis at the time. He's the guy that helped create that gated snare drum sound that was so prolific on Genesis and Phil Collins albums. Sort of came from his work with Susie and the Banshees, but that's another story for another time. That's the real origin of the gated snare drum sound that was all over records in the 80s. So there are some songs on this album. The reason I placed it at number 5, I'm not really a big fan of horns. That's the thing about me. Unless it's Billy Joel, because I grew up on Billy Joel. I like the horns mostly in Billy Joel's songs. And of course, the classic Chicago from the late 60s and the 70s. Great use of horns. But within the context of rock and roll, oh, Blood, Sweat, and Tears too. I can't say horns without mentioning the greatness of Blood, Sweat, and Tears. But I'm really going far off field here. So getting back to the Police, the horns here, it's a little much for me. And I love the first three tracks, the big singles, Spirits in the Material World, everything, every little thing she does is magic is an amazing song, and Invisible Sun. So the first three songs were the big singles, and that starts out the album. Then you get the five songs with horns, Hungry for You, Demolition Man, Too Much Information, Rehumanize Yourself, One World Not Three. I could just excise almost that whole part of the album. A lot of the horns, well, I'll let Tia talk about that after. But then the album ends really well. I love Omega Man, which is an Andy Summers song, and it spotlights his guitar work. It's got a really gnarly, great guitar riff. Secret Journey is really good, and Darkness, which is a Stuart Copeland song. And I like the eeriness of it, the keyboard work on it, and it just sounds mysterious. So I really like the beginning of the album and the end of the album. The middle of the album, I don't know. And the first time I heard Rehumanize Yourself, and Sting is singing the lyrics in a very fast, rapid succession. And I said, wait, did he just say what I think he said? And yeah, he dropped the C-bomb in that song, which in 1981, when I was a teenager, was unheard of, hearing that word in a song. And it still comes up on Spotify with an E next to it, explicit content. So that's very funny. So that's my number five. It's a good album. I mean, the Police never made a bad record out of the five records. They're all good records. Right. But maybe there's not a perfect album. A lot of people think there's a little bit of filler on every record. So that's my number five from 1981, Ghost in the Machine.
Wow. Wow. Unbelievable. No, I'm kidding. So my number four, their debut, Atlantis d'Amour. However you would
Atlantis
say it.
d'Amour.
Okay. So there are actually times when this is probably my favorite album, just depending on like what vibe I'm feeling. There are a lot of really solid pop songs on here. And I guess just really one of the things that I just didn't care for, why it would end up being at number four, was just how odd Be My Girl Sally. However, after hearing that song recently, I really actually appreciated like the piano commentary in the background, like as this fellow is talking about his life and his relationship with his, inflatable doll, essentially. There's like this very odd piano that's almost seems to be.
It's very jazzy.
It's jazzy, but
like a call and response.
Yeah, exactly. It's the other side of the conversation, which is kind of really open to interpretation. You don't know if this piano is saying like, "Oh, all right," or if it's just sort of disapproving or what it is. And he doesn't care for it, but Masoka Tanga, however you want to say it. It's a made-up word anyways.
I guess it's Masoka.
Yeah, it's a made-up term anyways. It doesn't even mean anything. I love it. It's really jazzy, intuitive. It's probably one of my favorite all-time Police tracks, to be honest. But I like it when they start steering more into jazz.
We'll be doing our top favorite songs in a future video. So
preview. But yeah, that's my number four.
Okay. My number four is their last studio record from 1983, the big, huge commercial album, Synchronicity. Oh my goodness, it's at number four.
What?
This album came out June of 1983. It was number one in the UK. All their albums were number one in the UK except the debut. Went to number one in the US. It's their only US number one album. Reached platinum in the UK. 8 times platinum here. Oh my goodness. That is a lot of albums sold. The Police were everywhere in 1983. You couldn't escape them. They even did a huge show by my house at the time at Shea Stadium in Queens, New York, which Sting said was the pinnacle of their career. And after that, he realized basically they couldn't go on much longer. More on that later, too. So getting into the guts of Synchronicity, 11 cuts, 44 minutes. That would be the CD and the cassette, which had an extra song, Murder by Numbers. But in 1983, I purchased the vinyl. So I only got 10 songs. Murder by Numbers was the B-side. And I love Murder by Numbers. It's a great song. Andy Summers and Sting wrote it. It's jazzy, but it's mysterious. And it has this really cool vibe. So Murder by Numbers is a great track. Also, I love Miss Gradenko, the Stuart Copeland song. My big problem with the song, it's only 2 minutes long. It's so darn short. I wish that it was longer. And then I want to give props to a song, I mean, you said that you really dislike Canary in a Coal Mine, but the song that gets so much hatred from police fans is on this record, Synchronicity, and it's Mother by Andy Summers. And he does the spoken word vocals or the screaming vocals, any way you look at it. He wrote it, and Sting does. I actually know Sting plays on this one. It's a different song I'm thinking of. Sorry, but most fans hate this song. When I was working in the record store and we would put on Synchronicity on CD to play, and my old boss would hear it, he'd say, "Dave, next track, skip it, skip it." He hated that song, Mother. It just drove him berserk. And I think a lot of police fans feel that way. Of course, the hits on this album are great, but they're a tad overplayed. I mean, I didn't get MTV till 87 or 1986, 87, even though this record is 83. They were really overplayed on Friday night videos or whatever other video shows I was watching, Casey Kasem Top 40. They were all over the place on radio, TV. You couldn't escape the police. They were the world's biggest band in 1983. And because of the tension within the band, something had to break. So they broke up. I also want to add they were nominated in 1984 for 5 Grammy Awards. They won 3 of the 5 Grammy Awards. So that just adds to the fact that they were the biggest band. Once again, this album was produced by the band and Hugh Padgham, just like the last one, Ghost in the Machine. I think I neglected to say the Police produced that album. Some songs that I think meander and are too mellow, they're very sparse, and the band did that on purpose. But I'm not really a fan, and the reason this sits so low, Walking in Your Footsteps, Oh My God, and Tea in the Sahara. I know they're very beloved tracks, most of them, but to me, they just meander a little. They're not horrible, they're just a little boring. So that's why this sits at number 4. That's my number 4, Synchronicity. Over to you, Tia.
Well, what a coincidence, because my three, also Synchronicity. So I won't go too much into it. I will say that this particular album was very influential for me because this is the first time I'd ever heard about Jungian psychology. It's mentioned very frequently, or Jungian psychology, I should say, is mentioned very frequently. So the reason why it ends up at number 3, much like he said, I feel like Walking in Your Footsteps is pretty weak. It's almost like a nursery rhyme. I may have said that about a previous song, and it has a tone that's almost condescending in a way. I think like Sting's heart was in the right place, but it's just almost you almost feel like you're being preached to, talked down to. And it is funny because this is maybe around the time that Sting was trying to save the rainforest, and like remember everybody was mad at him for some reason about it, which in hindsight just seems kind of silly. But what I love is like when it begins, like Synchronicity 1, it's like it's like really fast and you're really excited and you can't wait what's going to happen next. And then I believe it's Walking in Your Footsteps, like, oh, it's kind of a bit of a downer. But yeah, there are obviously a lot of fabulous tracks on here. I also love Miss Grandico, and yeah, I'm also frustrated by like how short that song is. I don't think you mentioned it all, like Stuart Copeland and his background, his father being a member of the CIA, and just how the song had a lot that seemed to imply like spying, espionage, which obviously Cold War '80s, like very it gets fashionable at that time.
Yes.
One of the things I also loved was the video for Synchronicity 2, which shows the members like in a junkyard. Sting's looking really fierce, like he's ready to go full Mad Max, and Andy Summers is over there playing what appears to be a broken antenna, which is one of my favorite '80s music video tropes. Is just musicians playing objects that are clearly not instruments. So yeah, like go watch that if you haven't. But yeah, that's it for the most part. Really great album. Just liked other ones better. That was my number 3, Synchronicity.
Okay, I should add because I do love the track Synchronicity too, especially Sting's lyrics. Sting is a really good lyricist. And to jump on what you said about Sting, everyone being mad at Sting, there were guys in the 80s, Phil Collins, everyone hated him. He was everywhere. Genesis, solo albums, Live Aid, both continents. Sting, because everyone thought he was pretentious with all his causes, like saving the rainforest.
Lawrence Ulrich in particular, just, I don't know, I just seemed to have it out for him, but I guess he did for everybody, so.
And Bono, because Bono was trying to save the world. And so those were like
competition.
The 3 big guys in the 80s, Phil Collins, Sting, and Bono, were just hated by a lot of people, especially people in the hard rock and metal world. Mm-hmm. They just hated those guys. They annoyed the heck out of them. But I like all kinds of rock, obviously, from metal to mellow. So, but I just wanted to jump on that.
I did want to go back and mention one thing, though. Mother, which I failed to mention. I love Mother, too. Like, Mother is great. And as he mentioned, like it is a much hated song, but if you're that person who's really into like the Residents, Frank Zappa, Ween, or just any kind of like weird experimental stuff, it just like it,
Avant-garde.
yeah, exactly.
It's very
Um,
avant-garde.
it's just very dramatic and cinematic. It's hilarious. But then, especially when that really fluttery guitar kicks in, like it's just like, oh, come on, like this. It's a great song. It has its haters, but no, it's a brilliant song.
You're right, because I neglected to mention Andy Summers' guitar work on that song. It's like that solo, that guitar
Hmm.
solo that comes screaming in. It might be like on the Arabian scale, or it's a different kind of scale, and it just sounds so unique and different from everything else. And that's what I like about the track. It's very different, and it is avant-garde. It's experimental, and the Police experimented.
Actually, even reflecting onto "Every Breath You Take," which is kind of notorious for being played frequently at weddings, when it's really a song about jealousy and paranoia. It almost feels like this is who this guy is, this paranoid, weird person, really. But Mother is almost like his backstory in a funny way, if you want to think of it
Oh,
that way.
I never looked at
Yeah,
it that way. That's intriguing. That's
different
interesting.
songwriters, but I guess in a way you can almost kind of think of
Hmm.
it like as a concept.
Yeah, it's a stalking song, and people play it at weddings. But they love the song, and it was a number one song both sides of the Atlantic. So their biggest song, they're known for it. Should I move on?
Yep.
Should I do my number three?
Yep.
Okay, coming in at my number three, their third album from 1980, October of 1980 to be specific, Zenyatta Mandada. And the title itself is gibberish. They just wanted something that sounded cool and just rolled off the tongue. And they tried a couple of titles, different ones, and they came up with Zenyatta Mandada. It really doesn't mean anything. Maybe you could say that Zenyatta, the word Zen, it points to Zen, the Zen way, a Zen way of thinking, but 11 songs, 38 minutes long, produced by the Police and Nigel Gray. And this was number one in America and number one in the UK, number five in America. It went platinum in the UK and double platinum in America. And listening to radio at the time, this is when I think the Police came into their own. I had heard a song, probably two songs each from the first two records, but the third record, I heard four songs on rock radio. So I felt this is when the Police really broke in 1980 with their third album, and it was their biggest selling record up to that point, Zenyatta Mandada. Things I don't like about the record, I personally don't like the way it ends, Shadows in the Rain and The Other Way of Stopping. They're not my favorite song, and unlike Tia, I love Canary in a Coal Mine, especially that wacky piano, which is played by the guitar player. Andy Summers plays that piano line in the song, which to me makes the song. And it just gives it this weird feel. I love Canary in a Coal Mine. I know that's not popular
Yeah,
with you,
but
but
it just everybody has their own different taste. The fact that some people could really hate something that other people love, that just shows
yeah,
how great and diverse like their music is.
precisely. Very good point. Bombs Away is Stuart Copeland's song. I like that song. And you mentioned it, Behind My Camel, which won them one of their first two Grammys for Best Instrumental Rock Performance. This is the song that Sting doesn't play on. He hated Behind My Camel, which Andy Summers wrote. So Andy plays guitar, keyboards, and bass guitar on this song. And the only reason Stuart Copeland is on it is because there was no one else to drum on it. He wasn't thrilled with the song either, but he followed Andy Summers' vision, and they won a Grammy for it. And they also won for this album a Best Rock Performance by a Duo or Group for Don't Stand So Close to Me. I mean, once again, the hits are good, but a tad overplayed. So that is my number three, Zenyatta Mondata.
It is actually pretty impressive that Andy Summers was able to get Behind My Camel on that album. Considering that the other band members hated it so much,
Yeah.
and there are just B sides, just outtakes that never made it onto the album. So my number two album is their fourth studio album, Ghost in the Machine. And the reason this is at my number two, I feel that it has like their best pop songs of all time. As David already mentioned, Spirits in the Material World, everything that we do, every little thing she does is magic. A really great song, like among the best in their catalog. It also has like a lot of another like really dreamy songs like Invisible Sun, Omega Man, Secret Journey, and Darkness. It's just like a really wonderful. We keep saying eerie, but which you don't really associate it with the Police. But yeah, like a lot of the guitar work, just Andy Summers just has he can create like some very spooky riffs. A lot of it just sounds like water. It'll be, I think of it as like bright, shimmery, like ripples of waves. But yeah, like a lot of really great stuff here. The weaker parts, I guess I somewhat agree with David. Just all the brass, all of the horns in there, the horny midsection, I like to call it, which doesn't bother me nearly as much as him. As he was speaking, I realized I'm wondering if they were referencing ska in any ways. Do you think maybe because that was kind of fashionable just beforehand, and they were sort of drawing a lot from what was popular at the time.
I
I
never
wouldn't
thought
really
about
think
that.
of it as like ska, but I don't know if they were just decided like, yeah, that somebody else is doing brass. We should maybe try a little brass. It doesn't really feel like they're doing much with it, and that's what kind of bothers me somewhat. They're just the horns just seem really repetitive. It's like why bother? But yeah, that's it. My number two, Ghost Machine.
Okay, moving on to my number two. Their debut album from 1978. It's Outlandish More. I speak a little Spanish, but not really French, so pardon my pronunciations if they're wrong. So Outlandish More is my number two. Came out November 1978. Went to number six in the UK, their only album not to hit number one in their home country. And it hit number 23 in the US. It went platinum in both the UK and the US. So it was their debut album. They had a bunch of songs to pull from. They had a lot of material that they had written. And like Tia said, the one track that I'm really not a fan of is Masoko Tanga, the last song on the album. 38-minute album, 10 songs. Their only album with 10 songs. Every other album has 11 songs. So the songs that I love on here, cut number one, Next to You, is a great song. And I neglected to say at the beginning of the video that the Police cover so many styles. They really started out as a punk band, and you hear it the most on the debut album. Of course, they're reggae, pop sounds, new wave, you can call it, and rock and jazz. So they pull from a giant pool, and maybe the horns that you said on Ghost in the Machine were from ska because they have that repetitive feel that a lot of the ska bands had in the early 80s. Not that there's anything wrong with that, that's just my take on it. So this album is the most punk out of everything they've ever done. And Next to You, cut one, just comes in there and it just kicks your butt. It's a great song. I love that. Originally, I should say the album title translates loosely to Outlaws of Love, Outlaws or Commandos of Love. Miles Copeland, the band's manager and also Stuart's brother, wanted to call the debut album Police Brutality.
Oh,
But
goodness.
when that was his idea, but when he heard the song Roxanne, he said, "Oh, it's sort of a little bit of a romantic sound." So he changed the name of the album. He ixnayed Police Brutality and came up with Outlandish D'Amour, The Outlaws of Love. Another great song, another rocking, upbeat song. Truth Hits Everybody. I really like that. It's a good deep track. And Born in the 50s. It just has that great feel. Just that chorus, we were born, born in the 50s. Love that. That's a really good song. The hits are really good. And I would say if it wasn't from Masoko Tango, it would almost be a perfect album. But that's just my feel of it. So that is my number two, the debut album, Outlandish D'Amour.
Okay, well, there's only one left. My number one, their second album, Regatta de Blanc. Uh, I I love every single thing on this album. I really feel that it's a perfect album. He insists that there are no perfect Police albums, but I really think this is the one. Even what some people might consider like the quote unquote weak song on Any Other Day is hilarious. I love that song. I mean it's really offbeat, but even that like it's pretty fantastic. But yeah, this has like the mega hits, the iconic songs, "Message in a Bottle," "Walking on the Moon," and once again Summer with his bright almost guitars that are like reminiscent of water. Yeah, so oh, I have to say Death Wish. Probably Death Wish that might, maybe I'm speaking too soon before we do our top 12 tunes, but Death Wish might actually be my all-time favorite Police song. It just, yeah, more of those really rippling guitars, those bright, crisp drums. And I have to say, I'll probably share a link here. There was another really wonderful video that I'd seen called the Genius of Stuart Copeland, Genius of Stuart Copeland, that actually really gets into what it is that he's doing when he's playing. Because I consider him my favorite drummer, but I'm not enough of a musician to be able to explain or understand why. But this particular video just really boiled it down to just his background, growing up partly in Northern Africa, and just hearing all of the influences there, and really what it is that he's doing. But yeah, fantastic. My number one, Regatta Blanc.
Okay, and that's also my number one.
What?
And we didn't talk about this in advance, but that is my favorite Police album, Ragata de Blanc, which loosely translates to white reggae. And they were white guys playing reggae, hence the title. Came out in October 79, number one in the UK, their first number one album in their homeland, number 25 here, went platinum in both the UK and America, just like their debut album. To me, it's the closest thing they have to a perfect album. Produced by Nigel Gray and the Police. Their debut album, by the way, was produced by the Police, by the band themselves. I neglected to say that. I'm a big fan of On Any Other Day. Love that song, Stuart Copeland song that he starts singing. Then Sting takes over. The Bed's Too Big Without You, just Sting's bass line in it is great. And I neglected to mention what a great bassist Sting is. Just that ear for melody. They're so hooky. The drums, Stuart Copeland on the drums, Sting's bass lines, and the way the soundscapes, sort of like Robert Fripp and Crimson, who Andy Summers did a few solo records with. He has like soundscapey. He does a lot
Yes.
of rhythm work.
Very cinematic sometimes, yeah.
That's a great word for it, cinematic. I gotta steal that word from my
Okay,
other videos.
there you go. You have it.
But together, they form this unique sound, and that's why they're so beloved. This record is great. And when they came to do the second record, Sting was a little bereft of material. So this record has more input from Copeland and Summers than any other Police record. Another great song, Stuart Copeland's song, Contact. And I love Sting's walking bass line on it. Boom, 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 boom. Great bass line in that song, in Contact. Love that song. Great deep track. And does everyone stare? Another Stuart Copeland song, which is really good. And I think he's playing the piano at the beginning of the song, but don't quote me on that. Another 11-track album, coming in at 42 minutes in length. So that is my number one, and we have the same number one.
Wow.
Very cool. Wasn't planned at all. I did want to mention a few things I forgot to mention. While the band, for the Synchronicity album, 1983, their last album, the tensions were so high within the band that when they were trying to record Every Breath You Take, they just couldn't get it right. They tried it their way where they were all working in separate rooms. Wasn't working. They tried to play it together, and Sting and Copeland actually got into a fist fight. And Hugh Padgham, the producer, almost quit the project because I can't take it. This is too much type of thing. And he almost quit producing the record. And later on, after the album came out and was a huge hit, Hugh Padgham said, and I'm going to quote him, quote, "In many ways, that tension is what ended up making such a good album." So in the end, everything turned out okay, well, besides the band breaking up. So I did want to say that. And I neglected to say that also Stuart Copeland, some side projects, if you want to check out, he did a thing under a pseudonym called Clark Kent, but to not get sued by DC Comics, he spelled Clark with a K. So Clark, K-L-A-R-K, Kent, K-E-N-T. He did this, and it was released on green vinyl. Originally, it was like a 10-inch green vinyl. It was collectible back in the day and went for a bunch of money. It's probably even worth more nowadays. And also he did a record in the late 80s, actually the early 90s, I think, called Animal Logic, with a jazz bass player and a female vocalist. And Oysterhead, I highly recommend the album he did. It has the guitar player from Fish, PH Fish, on it, Trey Anastasio, Stuart Copeland on drums and on bass and vocals. It has from Primus Les Claypool. So it's a very strange album. Half the album is sung by Les Claypool, half of it by Trey Anastasio from Fish. And of course, Stuart Copeland's drum work on the album is great. On every Police album, his drum work is phenomenal. And he's not my favorite drummer. He's your favorite drummer,
Oh
you
yeah,
said, which
yeah.
I didn't even know that. I don't think we've ever discussed that.
What? We're learning things about each
Yeah,
other now.
exactly. So, and we're doing it live for everyone. Well, live on tape. I saw the Police reunion tour in 2007, 2008. My friends took me, so I'll be forever grateful for them. Saw the show, the outdoor, I think it was Giant Stadium in New Jersey. So three big reunions that year. I saw Squeeze, who had gotten back together after an absence. I saw Van Halen, who had gotten back together with David Lee Roth. You know, it was 2007 that I think I saw them because they were all three shows were in the same year. And I saw the Police at Giant Stadium. And unfortunately, out of the three shows, the Police was my least favorite of the three shows because they had slowed down the tempo on so many songs, and it was a little more jazz like Sting's solo career. And although I like his first few solo albums a lot, and I did see Sting live for the Soul Cages tour in
Oh, nice. Okay.
1991. I saw him in Nassau Coliseum. The Great Concrete Blonde opened up. They were promoting their amazing album, Bloodletting, which I'm going to get to on a future show. More on that later. And so I saw Sting for the Soul Cages. He was good, but you know, a little maybe boring, and certain songs were just low key and jazzy. And I feel that they slowed down the tempo on a lot of the older Police songs, and that was that's why it wasn't my favorite show. And I hate to say that because the Police are a great band, so sorry about that. But I was watching, I had my grandmother's little opera glasses, and a lot of the show I spent watching Stuart Copeland, even though I was way up in the high tier at Giant Stadium. It's a great weather for an outdoor show. I think it was the summertime, if memory serves. And I was watching Stuart Copeland on the drums because he's so busy, and the way he plays things off kilter, out of time, all his little percussion. He is a great drummer.
Oh yeah.
And he adds a lot to the sound of any band he's in. So check out Animal Logic, check out the Clark Kent if you could find it. It's probably on YouTube somewhere. And definitely Oysterhead, highly recommended, from Davey Cretin. Also want to add, before we end the video, some other things besides having so many platinum albums around the world in other territories too. The Police released a live album in May of 95 called Live. It's a double CD set. Hit number 25 in the UK, number 86 in the US, and it actually had platinum sales in America. October of 86, they released their first greatest hits album of many to come called Every Breath You Take, the singles. It went to number 1 in the UK, number 7 in the US, 4 times platinum in the UK, 5 times platinum in the US. So next to Synchronicity, that's their biggest seller in America. In February 2002, they released an updated version of a compilation called The Very Best of Sting and the Police. Personally, I'd reverse those. The Very Best of the Police and Sting. But went to number 1 in the UK, number 46 in the US, 4 times platinum in the UK, gold here, certified gold in America. They released a big box set, and it wasn't even big. It was a little dark blue box set called Message in a Box, the complete recordings, and that's where you could find a lot of the cool B-sides they released. Came out in September 93, hit number 79 on the charts here, and went platinum. So they have a platinum selling box set.
Wow.
Really cool stuff on there. In the UK, the Police have 10 certified singles, either silver, gold, or platinum. Here in America, they only have 1 gold single, which, of course, Every Breath You Take is their biggest song in the States. So that's about it for our Police album ranking. Thank you for joining me, Tia.
Thank you for having me, David.
I appreciate it. You're my first in-person guest. There will be more guests. I want to remind everyone to please like, subscribe, and comment down below in the comment section. What's your album ranking of the Police? There are only 5 records. It's not a, well, it is sort of a hard catalog to rank because each record is so good. It's
one changes all the time, so yeah.
And I don't think this. I mean, there's only 5 albums, but
what's your ranking today? Like, how are you going to rank the albums this week? You know,
that's a good way to say it. So thank you for joining us on Cretin Classics. I'm Davey Cretin. This is Tia, and we'll see you soon. Tia will be back for more shows in the future. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.